So, the movie kicks off, and we see the story's hero, Willy Wonka, who's actually on a boat right now because he's heading to a new city for a fresh start. Wonka hops off the ship, full of energy, singing and dancing as he makes his way into the city, exploring different spots. He strolls through the market, checking out all the various shops, and then he spots a closed store with Wonka written on it. He thinks to himself, "This is my place. Look at all the people dancing, singing, and having a blast." But in reality, it's just him dancing away. Has a colloquial and authentic translation of your text into English. All of this was on his mind, and that night it just happened. He was still wandering the streets of the city when he finally sat down on a bench. Since he didn't have a home, he figured he would just sleep there. Suddenly, a guy came up to him and said, "I don't have a place nearby, but my wife and I rent out rooms. If you want, you can stay at our place for a fee." So he grabbed his stuff and followed the guy. When they got to the man's house, he also met his wife. Before getting the room, he had to sign an agreement that the guy and his wife had put together. Here's a colloquial translation of the text you provided. Just as he was about to sign, a black girl named Noodle sitting under the table gave Wonka a signal not to sign. Now, Noodle was actually their daughter. Wonka didn't quite understand what Noodle was trying to tell him, but he started to get suspicious. So, he opened up the entire agreement to check it out, but it was super long. Wonka didn't have the time to read it all, so he reluctantly signed it and ended up getting the room. After he left, Noodle's mom punished her for giving Wonka the signal. She locked her in a tiny, dark room. Willy Wonka heads back to the market and starts telling the people there about himself. He says, "My name is Willy Wonka, and I'm a magician. I also make some really fun chocolate that have a bit of magic in them." Then, Wonka takes off his hat, does a little magic, and pulls out a jar filled with chocolate. When he opens the jar, all the chocolates start flying up into the air. But as soon as Wonka gestures, all the chocolate return to the jar and close up. The people watching are super impressed and amazed, and they start clapping for him. Here's a colloquial and authentic translation of the text. Because they really enjoyed this magic trick, they only come around when the story's villains are involved, one of whom is named Slugworth, along with two of his buddies. These guys had a chocolate factory in town and distributed chocolate all over the place, which clearly meant they were not going to let Willy Wonka's chocolate get a foothold here. So, Slugworth tells Wonka, "Hey, we want to give your chocolate a try and see what they taste like." When they ate the chocolate, they couldn't help but realize, "Wow, this chocolate is amazing." But still, there was Wonka. Here's a colloquial translation of the text you provided. So, they're like, this chocolate is such a joke, totally useless." That clearly was a lie. And then suddenly slugs started floating in the air. Right along with him, the other two began to float as well. When Wonka opened the jar of chocolate, all the chocolates started flying around, and people standing nearby began to grab them. They started floating in the air too. Wonka says, "These are my magical chocolate. The effect only lasts for a little while." Once the effect wore off and everyone came back down, they all praised Wonka because everyone loved the chocolate. After that, Vanka went back to the Sam house where the landlord's wife. Here's a colloquial translation of the text. The woman was asking for the rent, but she was out of cash. So the deal was that if they didn't pay rent, they'd have to do chores around the house. That's when her husband tosses her into a big pipe, and she ends up falling into the basement. There, she meets 4 other people who also haven't paid their rent. They've set up a little laundry shop in the basement where they're all washing clothes. She gets along great with them, and they all become friends. Now they start teaching her how to wash clothes, and after a long day's work, they all head back to their rooms at night. The noodles are served to everyone, and she goes to Vanka's room with his food. When Vanka opens his bag, we notice he has a small setup that he uses to make his chocolate. At that moment, he makes a chocolate and gives it to Noodle, who really likes it. Next, we see the police chief arriving at a church to meet the father. The police chief hands him a chocolate, and after the father eats it, he presses a button with a plus sign on it. Immediately, the police chief's chair drops down, meaning he ends up in the basement. Then we see a secret setup in this place. Here's a colloquial and authentic translation of the text into English. Let's see. This was all about Slugworth and his buddies. They had a secret factory here where they used to make chocolate. They would bribe the police chief with the chocolate and say that no matter what happens, they had to stop Vanka from making chocolate. The next morning, the landlord starts whistling, and Vanka and all his friends come out of their rooms and head back to the living room to do their laundry. Before Vanka leaves, he starts chatting up the landlord, telling him, "I'm giving you some free advice. Treat your wife with love." Here's a colloquial translation of the text into English. Just keep doing this, and your life will get way better. So, when all the laundry is being done, Vanka uses his brain and magic here too. He sets up things in a way that everything starts happening on its own. Like, when the dog is running around, the clothes are getting washed by themselves, coming out of the water, and even drying up. So now, no one has to lift a finger, and everyone is pretty amazed and happy about it. The landlord has no clue about all this because he's busy trying to make his wife happy based on Vanka's advice. Here's a colloquial English translation of the text you provided. There was this little elevator where clothes would come in and out, and Vanka would hop in with the clothes and then come out. He and Noodle then went into a small room where a female giraffe was hanging out. Noodle started singing for the giraffe, who really seemed to enjoy it. Meanwhile, Vanka sneaked up from behind and started milking the giraffe to mix into some chocolate to make them taste better. Noodle then told him that her landlord and his wife aren't her real mom and dad. She actually found her way to them when she was just lying around somewhere. She's never even seen her real parents. Here's a colloquial translation of the text you provided. When she got sad, Vanka sang a song and danced to cheer her up, and it really worked. Noodle was pretty happy. So, late at night, Vanka and Noodle were dancing at the zoo when suddenly the police caught them. Just then, the police chief showed up and grabbed Vanka, dunking his head in cold water. Then he told him, "Don't ever make or sell chocolate again." Vanka was pretty upset about it. After that, he and Noodle went back home, and Vanka told all his friends about what happened. His old friend said, "I used to." Here's a colloquial and authentic English translation of the text. That old guy used to work for those three Slugworth and his buddies. One day, I stumbled upon his diary, and it had everything about their secret factory written in it, like the layout and plans, all of it. So now the old man spills the beans to Wonka about the map and the plans. This means Wonka finally knows where their secret chocolate factory is. The next morning, we see that Wonka, Noodle, and the other friends split up like spies and start secretly selling Wonka's chocolate. And whenever Wonka catches wind of it, here's a colloquial and authentic English translation of the text. So, whenever the police showed up, he would sneak away through the sewers. And that's how Wonka and his crew made a ton of money selling chocolate. One night, while Wonka was sleeping, someone quietly crept into his room through the window. This person was actually there to steal chocolate. As he was about to grab some, he accidentally stepped on something and ended up falling into a giant jar, getting pulled in by a pipe. That noise woke Wonka up, and when he checked, he found the chocolate thief trapped inside the jar. Turns out, it was just a little guy. Here's a colloquial English translation of the text you provided. Once upon a time, there was a little guy named Wonka, whose skin was red and hair was green. He introduces himself to a fellow named Ompla Lopa. They end up chatting, and we get to hear about the story of Ompla Lopa. We learn that quite a while ago, Wonka went to an island and picked some magical fruits which were being guarded by Ompla Lopa. The thing is, Ompla Lopa had no idea those fruits were being taken because he was asleep at the time. So, Wonka grabbed the fruits and took off. Later, when Ompla Lopa's mom showed up, she found out that the fruits had been stolen and Ompla Lopa was still snoozing. He got really angry and decided to punish him. So he kicked the Oompa Loompa out of his house, put him in a boat, and sent him away from the island. Now the Oompa Loompa is saying, "It's your fault I'm homeless. If you hadn't stolen, I'd still be on my island. That's why I was mad at you, and that's why I used to steal your chocolate." Then he tells him, "All right, just set me free. I promise I won't say anything bad and I won't even leave. I'll stick around, be your friend, and help you out." Trusting him, the guy goes along with it. Here's the text translated into colloquial and authentic English. He sets him free, but then he grabs some chocolate bars and makes a run for it. The next morning, we see that Wonka and his team made so much money that he could finally rent the shop of his dreams. They all head to the shop where he always wanted to work. Everyone was really happy, and together they cleaned up the dump of a place, spruced it up, and got to work. Basically, they started making chocolate. When Slugworth and his buddies caught wind of this, they called in the police chief and said they had to do something about it. Here's a colloquial translation of your text into English. When he tried to shut down his shop, the police chief said he legally opened it and there's no way to close it like that. But in the end, Wonk ends up losing his beautiful shop. A whole team stepped in, and after that, people started coming in. They transformed the shop into a gorgeous jungle filled with trees, colorful leaves, clouds, rain, and animals, all of which looked amazing because, funnily enough, everything was made of chocolate, which, of course, tasted incredible too. Everyone loved the decorations, and on the very first day, Wonk and his team were overwhelmed with customers. All the chocolate are flying off the shelves because people are absolutely loving Wonka's chocolate. Everything was going great. But here's the catch. Everyone started experiencing some weird side effects after munching on them. Their hair began to grow at an alarming rate. But get this, it wasn't just the usual brown or black. Some folks ended up with pink hair, others with blue, and even green. It was all thanks to Slugworth, who had snuck in some mysterious ingredient into Wonka's chocolate. That's what was making everyone's beard and hair grow like crazy. The people got so angry with Wonka that they completely wrecked his shop, destroying everything inside. It broke Wonka's heart, and he started to cry, feeling like everything was ruined. Just then, we see a scene from Wonka's childhood where his mom used to make the most amazing chocolate because she was a chocolatier. Wonka learned how to make chocolate from her, and he promised his mom that when he grew up, he would be such a great chocolatier that people would love to eat his chocolate and dance with joy because of how good they tasted. He wanted to start his own chocolate business. He will open up. But today that poor guy's dream seemed to shatter. Just then, his enemies, those three thugs and their buddy, show up. They tempt Wonk with money, telling him to make chocolate for them. But he flatly refuses their offer. They say, "Well then, you should just leave this town, because there's something wrong with your chocolate. You could get into more trouble down the line." With a heavy heart, Wonk packs up his things and leaves his home, heading to the port where those three had arranged a ship for him to escape on. Here's a more colloquial and authentic translation of your text. There were three guys there, along with the police chief. They were saying goodbye to Wonka, who then boarded the ship because he was just pretending to be a good guy. The ship started to set sail, and Wonka sat down, lost in thought. Just then, Oompa Loompa showed up because they had become friends, and he was going along with Wonka. Later, Wonka found out that Slugworth had tampered with his chocolate, so he rushed to find the captain to stop the ship. But when he got there, the captain wasn't around. There was actually a bomb instead. And in the next moment, here's a colloquial translation of the text into English. The bomb went off, and the whole ship sunk. So now, this scene has shifted over to Wonka's crew. They made a lot of money selling Wonka's chocolate, so they could each pay their room rent. Now, these folks were free, so they left. After they left, the landlord and his wife locked Noodle back in that tiny room. But just then, Wonka and his team show up and manage to free Noodle because he somehow survived the whole ship incident. Then, the team steals a female giraffe from the zoo and drops her off at the Sam Church where the chocolate factory used to be. Here's a colloquial translation of the text into authentic English. The giraffe runs around the church, causing all sorts of chaos, so the father quickly calls the emergency team. But it's actually Wonka's friend who answers the phone. A little while later, two of Wonka's team members show up pretending to be the emergency team to pick up Taff. Wonka and Noodle are also hiding in the Sam truck they're using. While Wonka's buddies take the giraffe away, Wonka and Noodle sneak down into the chocolate factory in the church's basement. Here, they find the diary that Wonka's old buddy had mentioned, the one that has all the dirty deeds recorded in it. Here's a colloquial English translation of the text. Well, the three of them finally show up right here. Slugworth and his two pals, Barka and Noodle. Slugworth starts explaining that Noodle is actually my daughter. I used to like this woman, and we secretly got married, which led to the birth of a daughter. The thing is, Slugworth never told anyone about the marriage, so every day, my wife used to bring our daughter, Noodle, to me and say, "This is your daughter." One day, I was so shocked that I left the little girl outside someone else's house, and that's when Noodle found out that her real dad is Slugworth. Here's a colloquial translation of your text. So this really awful guy, Slugworth, and his buddy grabbed these two at gunpoint and dragged them into a room where chocolate used to get mixed. They lock up the three of them in that room and start pouring chocolate on top like it's raining. Chocolate starts falling everywhere, filling the room up, and those two are just getting buried in it. The three of them are watching them drown in chocolate and start laughing as they leave. In the end, those two are completely submerged in chocolate. But then Oompa Loompa, Willy Wonka's friend, shows up and stops the gears of the chocolate machine. Here's a colloquial and authentic English translation of the text you provided. It stopped the pressure, which ultimately saved both of their lives, allowing them to breathe again. Wonka and Noodle came out of the church in that state, where Slugworth and the others were already standing, along with the police chief. Noodle had the diary that contained all the bad deeds of the three, making it evidence against them. He handed it over to Wonka's senior officer, as the police had arrived by then. When the officer saw the diary, he arrested Slugworth, his buddies, and the police chief too, because he had also been heavily involved in the shady dealings with the trio. Here's a colloquial and authentic English translation of the text you provided. As soon as it was given, chocolate started flowing out of the fountain instead of water, which was all part of Wonka's plan, and he had made this chocolate juice himself. Everyone enjoyed drinking it and started to dance with joy. Today, Wonka's dream finally comes true, and he couldn't be happier. Now, the surprise for Noodle was that Wonka was going to introduce him to his real mom, and when they met, both mother and son were overjoyed. Just then, Oompa Loompa came up to Wonka, and he was really happy to see him because, after all, he was the one who had saved his life, and he was also his friend. So, Wonka took off his hat in respect. He pulls out a big jar filled with chocolate from inside and hands it over, always promising to keep it with him. After that, Wonka and Oompa Loompa head to a spot where Wonk was about to open his new chocolate factory. He actually finds a great location, which makes him really happy. His dream of starting his own business is finally coming true. And just like that, this amazing movie wraps up.